This state of play production is made possible by the generous support of Biogen, Biogen, where science meets humanity.
So as you know, here at State of Play, we're talking about the role of women of color, particularly Black women, in the quest for political equality. And we're very lucky indeed. We have two extraordinary political professionals. We have Sharon Tramontano, no stranger to the State of Play audience, as a co-anchor, former Deputy Chief of Staff to President William Jefferson Clinton, and CEO of Blue Star Strategies.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to be on the show.
Thank you for being here, Karen. And then we have Regena Thomas, former Secretary of State for the state of New Jersey, and also the Director of Human Rights and Community Relations for AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Great to have you with us, Regena.
Thank you, Mayor. It is good to be participating with you today.
So as we talk about the role of women of generally, but certainly women of color in the quest for political equality, you have to talk about, I think, the 2016 election or campaign for president with Hillary Rodham Clinton. That had an interesting outcome. Can you sort of comment on what you perceived happened in 2016, Karen?
Well, it's pretty complicated. I think there were a lot of external factors that resulted in Hillary Clinton's loss. There were certainly internal factors. And what I mean by external factors, the Department of Justice, Russian interference with the election, and so on. But the lack of enthusiasm as these external attacks and internal errors mounted, I think resulted in the loss. And I think in terms of the women's vote, at least it looks like from Pew studies and others that white women just trailed away from her in the end. Not in huge numbers, but in enough numbers. Not so much Democratic white women, but certainly independent white women. And I think that cost her the election.
So, Regena, what is your take in terms of how women of color voted?
Women of color 100% was around Hillary Clinton. And I think immediately, sort of after her election, around the country, women of color surged in its intent to run for election and, in fact, coordinate amongst states to coordinate African American votes. And so I think she was that lift. I think there was some anger amongst African Americans toward white women in particularly, because we have always supported the Democratic Party, and many of them, white women, in general, sort of left the party. But I think it was one of the boosts that has, in fact, put us where we are now today with the surge of African-American women running and participating in politics.
So the overall vote, I thought, was 54% women that did vote for Hillary Clinton. Let me go first to you, Regena. Why is it that you think Black women, and what were the percentages? Do you know the percentages? And why would they be so enthusiastic for a woman from Wellesley and Yale?
I think it was about it was a Democrat. I mean, our options were to Hillary at the end. I mean, by far, African Americans do not vote Republican. And so I think that was an encouraging factor. And I think at the end, Bill Clinton did great for African American communities. Yes, there were a couple of things that sentencing and the like, but for the most part, I think African Americans felt good. They felt comfortable with Hillary Clinton. They believed that her policies were going to move the agenda for women, and particularly African American women. And so I think there was a history as the first lady, 2 terms, and the like. I think there was a history there of African American support. And so it carried over into her election.
So, Karen, what is your take on it? I mean, generally, we speak of a women's movement, a women's vote, or the women's vote. Women don't vote as a monolith. I mean, is that impossible to marshal a woman's vote?
Well, they don't vote as a monolith. And I think, well, one of the things that we have to remember is in our system, Republicans make up about, well, at least for 2016, the numbers were different for 2020. But in 2016, Republicans made up 31% of the vote. Democrats made up 35% of the vote. And independents made up 34% of the vote. And so what that means is, even as Hillary did, even when you're getting 94, 95, 96% of the Democratic vote, it's not enough. You have to move independents. And women, the white vote makes up 73% of the vote. Women are 41% of that vote, right? Hillary Clinton only got 39% of all of the white vote, right? I mean, Democrats aren't doing really well with the white vote. Biden did a little bit better, but we're not anywhere close to breaking 50%.
Well, let me just ask you this, Regina. In terms of the vote, I mean, is it really about the role of women, or is it about an economic survival issue? And does that explain the difference in patterns of Black women voters as against white women voters?
When Black women vote, they vote for families. They vote for children. They economic parity. They vote for safety of their children. They vote for education. And so I think less about a woman, but more so about the agenda items that are important to our communities. And so I think that is it. I mean, Democrats, but at the end of the day, it is now we are looking at sort of what is your platform? What do you stand for? How can it help me and my family? How can I be middle class America without the struggles that I have every day? How can I have clean streets? How can the environment be safe? Safe drinking water just for my children. And so I think those are the big issues. We are spending more time in the African-American community, particularly African-American women, whether it's NCNW, Black Women's Vote, or the like, as we move now into ensuring and protecting the SCOTUS candidate. It is about issues. It is about us not defining whether she is a woman or African-American, but the fact that her credentials stands for anything. And I think you'll see more of that, Mayor, as we move on until the midterm elections, African-American women defining agenda items.
Well, but in 2017, and I do want to talk particularly first Karen about this, and then you, Regina, the Women's March, it was incredible. I mean, it was an organic kind of event and an extraordinary event that swept the world. And that was obviously a reaction to the election of Trump. How would you define that? Did that suggest an emerging power, an emerging awareness? What do you think, Karen?
Well, and just following up on what Regina just said, I think white Democratic women vote as Regina has said. They vote issues about their family. They vote for the future of their children, issues of safety. I think the Women's March was about women of color and white women who are hugely democratic, hugely progressive coming out. I think independent women, especially independent white women, are where the swing is. And how we organize that, we keep organizing, and we need to keep doing that, Democratic women, both white and Black and women of color. And that's vitally important. So, because among that cadre, a lot of people still don't come out to vote, right? We're still like in the double digits of people not coming to vote. But we are struggling with independent women. And I think that's the needle that moved. And white independent women and white independent non-college educated women is the needle that moved away from, is the cadre of people that moved away from Hillary, for sure.
So, sort of as the closeout, Regina, do you see women, well, I guess to speak to Karen's point, Democratic women of all colors are coalescing, I assume, around the nominee, Jackson, or do you think that, is that suggestive of all women sort of coalescing, or what are you reading that as?
I believe it's suggestive of all women. There is some concerns amongst African-American women that we don't see white women with us as NCNW and Black Women's Vote constantly have rallies at the Supreme Court. We don't visibly see them, but I think, again, Democratic women across the board, whether they're Black or white, are supportive of this candidate. For African-American women, it is making sure that she is not disrespected and demeaned in any way. And so we come at it from a very personal standpoint. This sister has paperwork better than anyone that sits on the court now. And so we are making sure that we stand with her to ensure that that dignity is maintained throughout and no one disrespects her. Where white women are like, yes, we're going to get another woman. Black women are doing it, with everything in us. We're standing on sort of the Fannie Lou Hamer's back. We are intent that this is it. And I think that is engaging and galvanizing young and old women of color around the country, because the midterms now is kind of slow. Nobody really is in it. And we think that this Supreme Court nominee will give us that energy that we need to go throughout the country and ensure Democrats are winning at every level, even mayor down ballot. Where there was no sensitivity given to school board candidates or the like, with the CRT and all of the craziness that's coming from the right wing, we are all moving all the way down ballot.
Well, Karen, let me ask you this as a closeout. With the midterm elections coming up, do you think that there is a sense of urgency among women generally? I know among, women of color around voting rights, but, the issue of choice, as well as the culture battles. Do you think that's creating a sense of urgency?
I do. Out in the community, there are women who, not only on the issue of choice, but on the issue of education, on the issue of safety, where they see the game that is being played by Republicans. And I don't know if you noticed, but in Virginia, all the superintendents of school of every district throughout Virginia wrote a letter to Youngkin saying, stop this stuff, right? Stop what you're doing. So to Regina's point, I think, after 2016, a lot of people saw the sense of purpose in coming forward and running for election and taking part in our democracy. Our job is to hold that. And women matter because they vote in higher percentages than men do. And we've got to hold the fort.
Well, you've done a great job, both of you, of explaining it. It's a complicated issue because it's not an uncomplicated constituency. So really appreciate your insights, your wisdom, and your reflections here on State of Play.